My stepmother is staring at me from across the kitchen island while her fingers white-knuckle a glass of wine because I laughed at her father's joke. It has been a year since my 54-year-old father decided to marry a woman who is technically a year younger than me, and the atmosphere is always suffocating. I am 26 years old, and I've been an adult long before this woman entered our lives, so the forced parent-child dynamic she tries to push feels like a cheap theatrical performance. Mark is 52, and he is the only person in that house who treats me like a peer instead of a nuisance or a child because we share the same professional interests. Every time we start a conversation about work or life, I can feel her eyes burning into the side of my head while she waits for a reason to snap. She finally broke the silence by asking why I always talk to her dad as if I'm trying to steal something that belongs only to her. I tried to explain that Mark is just easy to talk to and our connection is purely respectful, but she snapped and said I'm crossing boundaries. My dad just sits there like a ghost in his own home and tells me to distance myself just to keep the peace while I'm being punished for a normal friendship. She is absolutely terrified. After that intense blow-up, I started noticing how she monitors every single notification that pops up on Mark's phone whenever we are all sitting together in the living room. I caught her leaning over his shoulder while we were discussing a simple work project because she is convinced there is a secret language hidden in our talk about architecture. It is honestly pathetic to watch a 25-year-old woman spiral into a silent madness just because her stepdaughter and her father have a functioning intellectual relationship while her own marriage feels like a transaction. I stayed completely silent and watched her thin lips press together as Mark complimented my recent promotion because he actually understands the immense hard work it took to get there. She tried to interrupt by bringing up a trivial domestic issue just to pull his attention back to her, but he dismissed it with a wave of his hand and kept talking to me. The air in the room became heavy and thick like it was about to rain glass, and I realized she wasn't just uncomfortable, she was genuinely threatened by my presence. I often wonder if she looks at me and sees the person she should have been if she had not married a man twice her age just for the security of his bank account. The insecurity is radiating. I decided to test the waters by staying completely quiet during the next Sunday brunch to see how long it would take for her to manufacture a new and unnecessary conflict. Mark kept looking my way while trying to engage me in a complex debate about the local economy, while his daughter sat there vibrating with a silent and unarticulated rage. I gave short but polite answers because I wanted to see if she would relax if I backed off, but her hostility only seemed to grow in the vacuum of my silence. She started making passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't know their place in a family tree while she pushed her expensive salad around her plate with a heavy silver fork. My father tried to change the subject to something neutral and safe, but she wouldn't let it go and kept circling back to the weirdness of my bond with her father. I realized then that she isn't afraid I will marry her dad, but she is afraid that I know her better than anyone else does because we are exactly the same age. She knows that I see right through the mask of the doting young wife, and she can't stand that I have a direct line to the man she respects most in this world. She is losing control. The pressure finally reached a terrifying boiling point during my dad's birthday dinner when Mark sat right next to me and started showing me pictures of the vintage car he just restored. I could hear her breathing getting shallow and fast while she stared at us from the head of the long table because we were actually having a genuine and unforced moment of joy. She suddenly slammed her hand on the expensive wood table and demanded to know why I could not just find friends my own age instead of always clinging to her family members. The entire restaurant went silent as the clinking of silverware stopped, and my dad looked like he wanted to vanish into the floorboards out of sheer and utter embarrassment. I did not raise my voice or show any anger because I knew that my cold calmness would be the ultimate weapon against her hysterical and baseless accusations of undermining her authority. She started crying and saying that I make her feel like an outsider in her own marriage just because I have a history with her father that she can never touch. It was a desperate and pathetic attempt to gain sympathy from the table, but everyone could see that she was the one creating this drama out of thin air. The mask has slipped. Mark finally stood up and looked his daughter in the eye with a coldness I had never seen before while he told her to sit down and stop making a fool of herself in front of everyone. He told her that my friendship was the only thing making these family gatherings bearable because I actually listen and contribute instead of constantly complaining about social status or petty insecurities. My father tried to intervene with a weak hand gesture, but Mark shut him down immediately by saying that he should not let his wife's personal fears dictate who his own daughter can talk to. The look on her face was one of pure shattered ego as she realized that her father was not going to choose her loud tantrums over a rational and adult connection. I sat there with my hands folded and watched her realize that she had no real power over me or the genuine respect I had earned from the men in her life. She tried to storm out of the room, but she tripped over her own ego and ended up standing in the foyer alone while the rest of us finished our meal in a heavy but honest silence. The power had fully shifted in that moment, and she knew that no amount of complaining to my dad would ever change the fact that she was the only child in the room. She is completely exposed. Things are very different now because the heavy silence in the house is no longer filled with her passive-aggressive whispers or her desperate and hollow attempts at gaining some kind of social validation. I still talk to Mark and we still share the same intellectual interests, but there is a clear understanding that his daughter's discomfort is her own burden to carry and not my responsibility to fix. My dad has finally stopped asking me to distance myself because he saw the toxic behavior for what it truly was and realized that family peace should never come at the cost of his daughter's dignity. I see her at events now, and she stays in the corner like a fading shadow while I move through the room with the confidence of someone who does not need to perform for attention. There is a certain calm dominance in knowing that you stayed true to yourself while someone else burned their own bridges out of a deep-seated fear and irrational jealousy. Life is far too short to shrink your own soul just to fit into the narrow mind of someone who chose a life of vanity over a life of genuine substance. I am finally at peace. Never apologize for a healthy connection just because it highlights someone else's internal insecurity, because people who ask you to dim your light are usually just afraid of what they will see in the dark. Have you ever been asked to give up a genuine friendship just to keep the peace for someone who is clearly in the wrong? Do you think the age gap between the father and the stepmother is the real root of this jealousy, or is it something deeper?